The smell of roasted ham and fresh pine needles hung in the air, but underneath it all, the tension was suffocating. Every fork clink and wine pour was just another reminder that this wasn't a Christmas dinner, it was a stage. And I already knew the script. I'm Celeste Harlow, the youngest daughter of the Harlow dynasty, the one they left off the inheritance list, the one they thought they could corner, silence, and forget. But tonight, Christmas night, was the end of that story. Evelyn, my older sister, clinked her glass like she was about to announce her engagement. Instead, she stood, smiling with that calculated grace she'd mastered since we were teenagers. "Everyone," she said sweetly, "I think it's time we talk about the future of this estate. And Celeste, it's time for you to move out." That was her mistake, because while she spent years trying to erase me, I spent years building a plan she'd never see coming. And tonight, I brought the deed. Silence followed her words like a wave crashing through porcelain. My mother blinked slowly, wine glass frozen in midair. My father cleared his throat, as if rehearsed, ready to back Evelyn up the moment anyone dared to challenge her. But no one did. Not yet. I stared at Evelyn across the dining table, lit by the antique chandelier that had hung above every awkward holiday we'd ever endured. She wore crimson, dramatic, deliberate, and just subtle enough to suggest power without saying it out loud. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were sharp. She thought she'd won already. "I'm sorry, Celeste," she added, feigning sympathy. "We've decided to sell the property. It's too much space for the family now, and we've had offers. Strong ones. Developers." Lorna, the housekeeper, paused briefly while clearing plates. She didn't say anything, but her glance toward me said everything. She knew. She always did. 30 years in this house, and Lorna could read tension like most people read weather reports. "I see," I said softly, dabbing at the corner of my mouth with the linen napkin. "And this was a family decision?" Father set his glass down and folded his hands. "Let's not make this difficult, Celeste. You've had a good run here, but it's time you started your own chapter somewhere else." Evelyn's stepping up to manage the estate. Of course she was. She'd wormed her way into the board of Harlow Holdings last year after marrying a man with the right last name. And now she thought she owned everything. I looked around the table. People who shared my name but had no idea who I'd become. That was fine. I hadn't spent the last 3 years investing in silence for nothing. They wanted to talk about the future? Perfect. Because I brought the past, the present, and the paperwork. Evelyn folded her hands like a polished executive delivering bad news in a press release. "The truth is, Celeste, we've had interest from a developer group in Manhattan. High-end restoration mixed with boutique rentals. It's the right time to sell, and honestly, it's not like you ever really fit into this place." That last part was a knife disguised as kindness. Evelyn always did love that game. Smile when you twist it. I glanced at my plate, untouched. "So it's not about downsizing, is it? It's about cutting me out." Evelyn tilted her head. "It's not personal. The market is changing." "You mean your leverage is slipping," I murmured, more to my glass than to anyone else. "What was that?" she asked, still smiling. "Nothing," I said, meeting her gaze. "Tell me about this buyer." She was too eager, jumping at the chance to prove she'd done something impressive. A syndicate backed by the Wells Group. They're offering above market. They'll renovate, restore the wings that are falling apart, bring in capital, prestige. You wouldn't understand. These are complex asset transitions. Father nodded in agreement. "This estate has outlived its function. We must be practical." "Practical," I echoed. "Like refinancing the trust 3 times to cover Evelyn's IPO misfire? Or selling off grandmother's paintings to pay off Harlow Holdings' settlement last spring?" The air thinned. My mother's eyes narrowed. "Where did you hear that?" "I didn't hear it," I said. "I read it. In the quarterly statements. You should really change your accountants. Their digital encryption is laughable." Evelyn's jaw tensed. "Celeste, this is a family matter." "Yes," I said slowly, pushing back my chair. "So let's talk about the family, starting with who actually owns this property." And with that, I reached for the leather folder at my side. I opened the folder slowly, letting the silence thicken. Paper rustled like thunder in the hush of that ornate room. Evelyn's smile faltered. Not visibly, not to anyone else, but I saw it. A microsecond of fear behind those manicured lashes. This, I said, laying down the first sheet, is the deed to the Harlow estate. Purchased legally 2 years ago through an entity known as Marlowe Syndicate, LLC. My father squinted. That's a shell company. Who? Me, I answered. I'm the sole stakeholder. Evelyn let out a laugh. Short, sharp, nervous. You're joking! No. I slid the next page across the table. Transfer documents, escrow confirmations, and digital notarizations, all time-stamped and verified. When the family trust defaulted on its loan after your margin call disaster, the property quietly moved to liquidation. The bank was discreet. They appreciated my offer. Liquid capital, clean title, no press. But that trust was protected, my mother said. It couldn't have been touched. Not when you used it to float a bankrupt real estate firm, I replied coolly. Or when Evelyn failed to file amended financials and triggered a breach clause. That trust was a fortress until you turned it into Swiss cheese. I looked directly at Evelyn. The irony is, you thought you were manipulating the system, but I built a better one while you were too busy curating your LinkedIn profile. Evelyn stood now, red with fury. You think you can just walk in here and claim this house, this legacy, as yours? I smiled, slow and cold. No, I don't think I can. I already did. Lorna, silent all evening, set a fresh glass of water beside me. And as she did, she gave a single, subtle nod, like a quiet blessing. This was my table now. You can't do this, Evelyn snapped, voice rising. There are rules, contracts. You can't just buy your way into authority. I tapped my fingers against the table. Oh, I didn't buy authority. I reclaimed it. The only difference between you and me is I did it legally. Father finally spoke again, his tone sharp and tired. Celeste, if this is about revenge, no. I interrupted, meeting his eyes. This is about accountability, something this family hasn't seen in decades. I unfolded another document. These are wire transfers from Harlow Holdings to offshore accounts, all routed through shell corporations tied to Evelyn's husband's firm. Here, look at the dates. They coincide perfectly with quarterly earnings drops. Mother's face went pale. Evelyn took a step back. You've been spying on us. No, I've been protecting myself ever since you blacklisted me from the board, blocked my access to the trust, and told your legal team I was emotionally unstable. Father scowled. That was a misunderstanding. Really? Because I have copies of your emails, dated, signed, and forwarded to the firm's general counsel, suggesting I be handled quietly after I questioned the missing pension fund documents. The room began to close in. My sister didn't speak. She couldn't. There was nothing left to deny. You forged my name to approve fund withdrawals, I added. You stole millions from our family accounts to cover your losses, and you tried to erase the one person who was never meant to stay quiet. I stood now, calm as ever, and laid one final folder at the center of the table. This one is for the SEIC, but I figured I'd give you a preview. Lorna stepped aside as if clearing the stage. Now, I said, voice level, shall we talk about Aunt Margot's will? The mention of Aunt Margot's will froze the room. Evelyn blinked first. That's irrelevant. The will was finalized months before she died. I was her executor. Wrong, I said. The real will was never filed, because it never reached probate. I pulled out a USB drive and placed it on the table like a live grenade. This contains hospital security footage from the night before Margot passed. It shows you Evelyn entering her room at 11:42 p.m. It also includes a nurse's statement confirming she heard shouting, something about how you deserved it more than your little sister. My mother's wine glass tilted in her fingers. Evelyn, tell me she's lying. She's making this up, Evelyn hissed. No, I said. I'm documenting what you erased. The video also shows you leaving with a stack of papers that never made it into any court filing. And 6 hours later, Margot was dead. Her signed will vanished. A new one, giving everything to you, miraculously appeared. Evelyn's face drained of color. You have no proof that she changed her will under duress. Oh, but I do. Margot had already sent a draft of her revised will to her attorney and copied me on it. She intended to cut you out entirely, said you reminded her too much of your father. Father flinched. And just in case you want to claim coincidence, I added, I also have her final blood work. Elevated potassium levels, lethal dosage, not from her condition, from something added. My mother finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. Celeste, what are you saying? I'm saying Evelyn didn't just steal the estate. She ensured Margot would never speak again. The chandelier above us glittered coldly, and Evelyn, for the first time in her life, had no words left to hide behind. Evelyn's mouth opened, then closed. Her confidence had curdled into panic. Even Father looked stunned, his usual commanding presence reduced to a man trying to outrun ghosts he thought were buried. You've been investigating your own family? He asked, voice low and bitter. No, I said, locking eyes with him. I've been protecting myself from my family. I reached for my phone, unlocked the screen, and pressed a single button. They'll be here shortly. They? Evelyn asked, her voice breaking. The SEC and the police. What did you do? My mother whispered. I did what none of you ever taught me to do. I told the truth. I stepped around the table, calm, deliberate. You lied, stole, manipulated, and erased anyone who didn't serve your narrative. Me, Margot, even Lorna, who has kept this house running for 30 years, while you all played dynasty. Lorna's eyes welled with quiet relief. And now, I continued, you're going to answer for every lie, every forgery, every piece of stolen trust. Footsteps echoed down the marble hallway. My father pushed back his chair. This is madness. You're destroying the family name. No, I said, pausing. You destroyed the name. I'm just turning on the lights. The front door opened. 2 detectives, followed by 2 agents in dark suits, stepped into the room like shadows with purpose. Evelyn Harlow, Reginald Harlow, the lead officer said. You are under arrest for financial fraud, embezzlement, and obstruction of justice. Evelyn tried to protest, but her voice cracked into silence. Handcuffs clicked into place. My mother stood in the corner, one trembling hand over her mouth. I didn't offer comfort. Not yet. This wasn't over, but it was justice. After the door shut behind the agents, the house went still, eerily so. The grand dining room, once a monument to wealth and pride, was now a mausoleum of ruined reputations. Only my mother and I remained, along with Lorna, who stood quietly by the sideboard, unsure whether to stay or slip away. You planned all of this, my mother said finally, her voice hollow. You planned it down to the second. I had to, I replied. You left me no choice. She stared at the broken wine glass still lying on the floor. And what now? You've won. Is that what you want to hear? I walked to the window and looked out at the frozen garden. Snow blanketed the hedges and statues, softening even the harshest angles. No, I don't care about winning anymore. I care about what comes next. I turned back toward her. You can go to Vermont, like we discussed. There's a condo, paid for. Quiet, safe, near that library you always said you missed. I've already arranged the move. It's your choice. She stared at me like she didn't recognize the woman standing in front of her. After everything we did to you? Hate takes too much energy, I said. And I have work to do. I turned to Lorna. You're not just staying. You're being promoted. Operations manager, full salary, full benefits. This place will be something different now. Her eyes widened, then softened, and for the first time in years, I saw her smile. My mother sank slowly into the nearest chair. Why are you still helping us? Because, I said quietly, some people are worth saving, and some people just need a chance to change. Outside, headlights flashed across the lawn. The moving trucks had arrived, and the next chapter had already begun. 3 months later, the house no longer echoed with the weight of old arguments. The heavy velvet curtains were gone, replaced with light filtering panels that welcomed the sun. The oil portraits of glowering Harlow patriarchs had been taken down, some donated, others boxed away in the attic. In their place now hung work by young local artists, bold, vibrant, full of movement. The Harlow estate had become something new. The Harlow Innovation Center, a nonprofit tech hub for underprivileged youth. Robotics classes now filled the parlor. 3D printers buzzed in what used to be the drawing room. The dining room, yes, that same room, was now a collaborative workspace with laptops and smartboards and laughter. Lorna, once invisible to the family, now wore a blazer with her name stitched on a badge. Operations Director. Her posture had changed. Shoulder square, voice firm. She belonged here now. Fully. As for me, I lived on the third floor in what used to be the nanny suite. It was small, sunlit, and perfect. That morning, I stood in what was once my father's study, now my office. On the desk lay a handwritten letter from a student named Ria, thanking me for the scholarship that let her attend our coding boot camp. "I never thought someone like me could be in a place like this," she wrote. "Now I know I belong." I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer with a dozen others just like it. Downstairs, a robotics demo was about to begin. I headed down, heels clicking on hardwood. At the foot of the stairs, one of the teens waved me over. "Miss Harlow, can you help us debug our drone code?" I smiled. "Absolutely. Let's build something amazing." Because finally, this house was serving its true purpose. Catherine, my cousin, and once Evelyn's shadow, had finally broken free of the family script. She was finishing her first semester of community college, studying early childhood education. I'd set aside a modest trust for her, enough to pay tuition, rent, and groceries. Nothing extravagant, just enough to help her build something real. She texted me every week. "Last Tuesday, all A's again. I think I finally found what I meant to do. Thank you, Cel." My mother had taken the condo in Vermont. She volunteered at the public library now, reading to children on Saturday mornings under the name Mrs. Harlow. The socialite title was gone, but she seemed lighter. We spoke every few weeks, never about Evelyn, never about my father. Some ruins are best left undisturbed. My father and Evelyn were both serving their sentences. 12 years for him, 20 for her. The financial damage they caused had gutted Harlow Holdings. But the courts had approved a restructuring agreement, one that included liquidation of non-essential assets to repay pension holders and investors. As for the Harlow name, it no longer carried weight in finance, and that was fine by me. We were building something new, something not rooted in appearances, but in access, growth, opportunity. The very things this house was once built to keep out. One morning, as I stood in the doorway of the new media lab, watching a group of students assemble their first AI prototype, I felt a strange peace settle over me. Not satisfaction, not revenge, just resolution. What they tried to tear down, I rebuilt stronger, not because I had to, but because I could. The last light of the day spilled across the lawn as I stood in the front doorway of the estate. No, the center. Watching the students pack up their gear, laughter trailing behind them like music. It wasn't just the sound of kids leaving class. It was the sound of something new being born, something this house had never known. I still wore the emerald pendant my Aunt Margot gave me. Some days, I'd catch my reflection in the glass and remember her sharp eyes, her quiet, deliberate strength. She'd seen what I was becoming long before I did. She didn't live to witness it bloom, but everything I built here came from the seed she planted. Now it was thriving. Later that evening, I wandered through the house. Not with an agenda, not to check in, but to feel it. The air was different, lighter. I passed a group of students finishing a project in what used to be the music room, now a hybrid workshop filled with code manuals, circuit boards, and ideas. The dining room was quiet. A whiteboard leaned against one wall, filled with equations about machine learning. The long table that once hosted cold dinners and colder silences was now covered in robot schematics and energy drink cans. I ran my fingers along the wood, still polished, still heavy with history. On the mantel sat a photo of Aunt Margot. Not her stern official portrait, but a candid one. She was laughing in the garden, holding a trowel, dirt on her cheek. That's the woman I remembered. The one who taught me to see truth where others saw tradition. I looked at her, and then I whispered, "This house is still in the family. Just a better kind of family now." Then I turned off the lights and walked to my office. Tomorrow's schedule was already stacked. Meetings with donors, a STEM equity roundtable, a pitch from a group of teenage girls designing their own AI tool. But tonight, I sat by the window and watched the snow fall. Soft, steady, unafraid. Not like before. This snow wasn't a burial. It was a beginning. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't fire. It's foundation. And I had only just begun to build.